Hello YouTube. A few years back I started making this ET. I was never very pleased with it. I had planned to kind of build up all the details and things using Milliput on the top of this, but because I never liked the overall proportions, I never liked how chunky it was. I always felt like the arms and everything were a bit too thick. So by adding milliput and things on top of it, it would just make it even thicker and even more out of proportion. The ribs are really wonky as well, and the finger is broken over the years. So I decided basically just to bin this one and start again. So I just recently did a show called Makers Central at Birmingham NEC, and I'd made this wire armature of ET, and I was going to take it along and be working on it on my stand, but I'm glad I didn't because I really wanted to be able to talk to all of the people that I met there, and I think this would have just got in the way. So this is just 2mm aluminium wire, drilled some holes in this wooden base, twisted all the wire around itself. It's really easy to bend this stuff because it's so soft. And I made a kind of a loop here for the hip area, another loop for the sort of chest and everything like that. And then I've got obviously wires going down for the arms. And you can see I just started blocking in all of the spaces using aluminium foil. I've got a very thick kind of twisted wire right through the center of this as well, just to strengthen it. You can see here on the head, I've just used the wire to form this kind of overall shape. And again, you can see where I started stuffing aluminium foil into it to kind of make it a bit more solid. There you go. The arms are pretty simple, just 2 wires at the moment. I'll probably add a few more wires to this before I start bulking it out. Again, with aluminium foil to start with. So here he is with a lot more aluminium foil added to him, and you start to see the rough kind of ET shape. It obviously needs a lot more work, and it's only, very loosely put on. So I'm going to go over the top of this using kitchen paper and PVA glue to give it a kind of a strong skin. That's basically just paper mache kind of effect added over the top. So after Makers Central, the guy from Milliput sent me a whole load of free Milliput. He sponsors this channel very kindly. Believe it or not, I actually end up using all of those standard Milliputs, that's all the ones in the red boxes. I use all of that on this ET figure. And I used the box of black as well. This one's silver grey. Silver grey is one of my favourite colours to use because it really kind of shows up all the detail and things. So I'll save this one for a future project, all of these boxes here. But yeah, all of those standard ones went. So he ends up being really heavy, this figure. Right, hopefully you can see that I covered all the aluminium foil with kitchen paper and PVA glue. That gives that really tough kind of skin effect. You can't just use normal PVA glue because it's not strong enough. You've got to use wood flooring PVA or super PVA, and it becomes really tough. Like you couldn't tear it very easily just with a few layers of kitchen paper. You can see I've put a bamboo pole in for now. That's just to keep his head up while I'm working on it. Inside this neck there is a kind of a bracket, a metal bracket that goes in there. So it's supporting like the head, and it goes down into the neck, and then I've built up the milliput over the top just to build a few kind of creases and things into his neck. But hopefully that'll be strong enough to support the whole head because it's a very big head, and it will end up being pretty heavy once it's all covered in milliput. The feet, you can see I've started working on them. Basically just put the 3 toes on with the toenails, but all of the leg folds and everything have to be put on over the top of this. This is the nice thing with working with milliput. You can basically just do bits at a time and then wait until they're dried, and then you can just add more and more. So milliput is a 2-part putty, and you mix the 2 parts together and then it starts to set, and it sets rock hard in about 4 hours. Right, next I started adding those foot folds on. I'll just show you some of those. That's just a case of rolling out kind of long sausages of milliput and then squashing them so they go flat, just adding one on at a time. So work from the bottom and work upwards. And once they're sort of in place, you can use a silicone tool with a good point on it, and then you just press in. This is the tool I've been using. You can see it's got a very soft, flexible silicone tip to it, and that doesn't stick to the milliput or anything like that. So you can just press it in like this to get all of the kind of creases and folds. So I go that way, and then I also go this way as well. And quite a lot of the wrinkles and things on ET are done in this way, and just build them up, and they'll all show up really well when I come to paint them. Okay, then I took a ball of aluminium foil and I put milliput over the top of it and I rolled it into a ball. I'm just leaving that then to set, and then I'm going to cut it in half, and that will make the eyes. Okay, you can see I started making his kind of I always call it a sort of like a beak area, but his mouth. And again, I started pressing in like a lot of creases and things into that, a lot of mouth wrinkles, and I go upwards like that as well, um, and just go with a curve. Follow the curves, the contours of his mouth. I'll just show you what his eye looks like in position, just to give you an idea. Remember, this is going to be cut in half, so there'll be half in each side. Doesn't matter that the bottom of the eye has gone a bit flat where it's been resting on a surface, because when it's cut in half, you won't see that. Although Milliput is really kind of rock hard, you can saw it. So I've got this Tamiya craft saw, or Tamiya, however you pronounce it. If this was a solid ball of Milliput, it would be really hard to cut in half. But because it's just like a shell of Milliput over the top of an aluminium foil ball, it will be really easy to cut. Right, this is what the ball looks like cut in half, and it doesn't matter if it's a bit wonky around the edges or anything, because it's going to be put in position and then you put all of the eyelids and everything around it. So that kind of hides the edges anyway. But you can see there, it's just two domes and they're going to go into the eye sockets. And what I'll do is I'll just push a bit of milliput into each socket, and then I'll press these into it. That'll keep them in place. And then obviously when you make all of the eyelids and everything to go around it, that also holds it in place even stronger. This is what the inside of each dome looks like. You can see with all the aluminium foil all squashed up. That is really, really easy to saw through. Right, this is Milliput Black, and I tend to use this for, um, areas that don't matter so much because you don't need to see the detail in it. So here you can see I put it into the eye sockets, and there's a big blob on each eye there. And what I'm going to do is press the eyes that I made onto that, and that will set them in place. That aluminium foil, because of the texture, it will grip really nicely to that black milliput. Okay, I couldn't resist showing you this stage. Um, no, I haven't made a pair of chesticles for ET, don't worry. These are still his eyes. But what I'm going to do is push this little ball on the top of each one. And what I'm trying to do here is to flatten it down to make a nice kind of iris shape. I've got a lot of these little kind of technical stencils. You can see this one's got all ellipses on it. And I had thought that I had one with a lot of circles, and I thought the circles went up a bit bigger than they did, but that's my kind of biggest circle there, and it's not big enough. So what I ended up doing was just using a bottle top, and I just pushed that in. Here you go, just the top of a bottle. Push that in, and that gave me my circle, and then I could just cut around the edge of it. So here he is with his eyes in place. Obviously this will look much better once it's all painted, but hopefully that gives you a sort of an idea about how I'm going about it. Next I decided to make his nose and all of the kind of wrinkles of skin that go above his nose. Again, you can see all of the kind of the ridges that are pushed into this, all using that silicone tool that I showed you before, and all of the ridges that go in the opposite direction as well. That's looking quite nice, and it really does look like skin already. Obviously when it's painted it will look even more like skin, but that's a good starting point. With the surrounds of the eyes, I've just literally been pushing Milliput in. It's very rough at this stage because I've still got all the eyelids and things to put on. I'm just kind of filling spaces really with the Milliput. I also added this kind of chin flap that goes back at quite an angle so that there's space to add kind of skin folds and things on top of that as well. The black milliput that I've added here is just to fill space underneath the neck. It's also a support because it goes down the chest, so it's taking the weight of the head through the neck down into this black milliput. I put a bit of black milliput underneath the armpits as well, again just to strengthen that place where the arms meet the body. Okay, this next stage was just making the chest area using aluminium foil. So very basic, very rough shapes in here. These will all be refined when I go over the top with kitchen paper and PVA glue later, like this. There you go. That's with the kitchen paper and PVA glue added. That again strengthens it. It will all dry nice and kind of firm and solid. And then that's the perfect surface for me to work over the top of with Milliput. Right, some of the next stages that I've done, you can see I did the eyebrow ridges. I started those off again with aluminium foil just to get a really big kind of bulk of it done really easily and quickly. And then I've just gone over the top of the aluminium foil with the milliput, thin layer of milliput. And again, you can see where I've pressed in all the wrinkles and things using the silicone tool. I carried on down the body. I did like his tummy area and where his kind of lumps are near his pelvis. And it doesn't matter with these if you make them a little bit too big at this stage because the aluminium foil is still fairly squashy. So it means that you can go in and you can push in and you can kind of squash it in even more to kind of shrink it a bit. It's only when you put the milliput over the top and it sets rock hard, you can't really do anything with it after that. But up until that point, you can, if you press really quite hard, you can adjust what you've done. Right, I really love doing this stage because this is where you can get your milliput and you can flatten it into a really thin layer and you can just put it over the top of everything that you've done already. And it's just so satisfying to get it in there. Once it's on, you can work in stages. You don't have to put like all of this on in one go. So I did, his upper chest area, then I did like a couple of ribs at a time, and you just again are pressing in with like that silicone tool to get all the wrinkles and things in there. And I just love how it just starts to look like flesh instantly. You can see I did those kind of ridges like in the middle of his chest area. That worked really well. Now I've just got to go over those folds that are down by his abdomen. I thought I'd give you a bit of a close-up of this kind of chest area. You can see those were just really long, thin sausages of milliput just put on and kind of blended in with a ball stylus tool. And then you can see I've added more to the shoulders there. I'll keep adding to the shoulders to really kind of strengthen those. You can see here, look, I've gone over all of those kind of abdomen folds and they work really well. Again, just adding the texture of the skin. Okay, for his back area, I mean, sometimes when I make a model, I don't really mind if I leave the back really kind of loose and unfinished because, and 9 times out of 10, you're only viewing these from the front anyway. When they're on display, you just see the front. But with E.T., because I knew he was going to be a fairly major figure, I decided I was going to make him properly. So you can see here that I've made some aluminium foil bits for his kind of buttock areas. And then I'm going to do the same to give me some kind of ribs and things going up the back. So after I did the buttocks, I covered them with the kitchen paper and PVA glue, and you can see they're still wet, they're kind of still setting. While they were still setting, I made the kind of rib areas for the back. And you can see how I've done them to start with is just like basically the overall shape. And then I will add kind of separate ribs on top of that. This is the kind of kitchen paper that I use, and all I do like is rip it into these sorts of shapes rather than have any kind of flat edges to them. I just round off all of the shapes. This just shows those kind of rib areas on his back, all covered with the kitchen paper and PVA glue. You can see it's very rough looking at this stage, very lumpy, but that doesn't matter at all. It's the Milliput stage that refines it all. Right, for the arms, I've done a similar thing where I've just squashed a whole load of aluminium foil. This is to create the muscles. So for the upper arm, it's just kind of like doing one big muscle, really. For the lower part of the arms, I've done a muscle on each side, and they're pretty big at the moment, but again, I haven't fully squashed these yet. I've just kind of stuck them on. You can see I've gone over the upper arms with kitchen paper and PVA glue. I need to do the same for the lower arms, but I'm going to squash them a bit first. Okay, you should be able to see that I squashed that aluminium foil in quite a bit on the lower parts of the arm. On the upper part, I've just gone over with some Milliput, but I've left a gap right at the top there and right on this joint. And the reason for that is to give it a bit of flex, because Milliput, obviously, when it sets rock hard, if it's a very thin layer of Milliput like I'm using here, if you were to knock the arm quite hard, you might crack that kind of outer shell of Milliput. So what I've done is leave that little gap so I can fill that with glue, and that glue is quite flexible. So it means that if you knock the arm, it'll just flex at those two positions. Okay, here you can see I've done quite a bit more work on the face. So let's have a little zoom in. You can see I've been working on the eyelids. So for the upper eyelid, I've just put one on to start with. And for the lower eyelid, I've done one sort of major one and then kind of 3 folds underneath it. So I need to add more folds to the upper eyelids, but that's how it's coming on so far. Underneath here, look, I've continued that shape around. So you've got that kind of fold of skin under his chin, and that works really well. Again, more wrinkles added to that. I've added more wrinkles in under these kind of eye sockets as well, and that's working quite well. I'm pretty pleased with how he's looking. He's starting to remind me of E.T, which is good. So for the hands, you remember I had like the long wire sticking out, so what I've done is wrapped that around another bit of aluminium wire, and I made the hands and just armatures for the hands. But because I left that wire, that single wire sticking out of his arm, I was able to use that to kind of lock it in place. And then I've also used a bit of aluminium wire to go up around the wrist areas, and then Milliput will be put over the top like this, and that strengthens everything. So similar thing again, I've just put the Milliput over the top just to get my basic hand shapes on there. You can see like I'm going to put tendons on the top of the hands later. I'll also do details for the fingernails and then each kind of knuckle joint as well. I thought he was going to have fingernails, but he doesn't have fingernails. Apparently his hands were based on the hands of a toad. So you can see all the extra leg folds that I've added on there, making the legs look really kind of nice and detailed. The long finger that's kind of pointing, I really wanted to have that one really sort of outstretched because that is a typical kind of ET feature. I'll just show you the upper eyelids as well. So exactly the same way that I did the lower eyelids, just adding one at a time. Again, work from the bottom and then add another one and add another one. Keep doing it until you've filled the space. They're pretty uniform. I managed to keep them symmetrical on both sides and it worked quite well. It's just a case of getting the same amount of Milliput for one eye and then use the same amount again for the other eye. Right, you can see these joints on the arms that I was talking about. So I built up layers of glue. I think it took me quite a few layers, probably about 6 or 7 layers of glue, just adding one over the top, let it dry, put another one on, and it's made this nice kind of slightly rubbery joint. So it really protects the arms and makes them slightly flexible. It's not really flexible, but it's just enough to prevent any damage. Right, I'll show you how I'm getting on with the back area. This is a sort of work in progress at the moment, but I started by adding some Milliput from the neck underneath the back of the head. Again, this is strengthening it. It's helping to keep the head attached to the neck and show all the kind of tendons and things that go up into the head. On this back area, I've added individual ribs, again, just with aluminium foil to start with, and then I've gone over the top with kitchen paper and PVA glue. As this dries, I can refine it more. I can squash the shapes a little bit better. You can see I've added that sort of muscle mass between the bottom of the ribs and the buttock areas as well. Right, these are the sculpting stages, all pretty much completely finished. All of the Milliput stuff is done, apart from a tiny bit that I need to add underneath his tummy, but that won't take me very long. The reason that I've done this as two videos, I've done the sculpting stages as this first video, and then I'm going to do another video of all the painting stages. It's just because this was a fairly major project. It ended up taking me a couple of weeks to get to this stage. He is life size, so he's a pretty big figure. He's definitely the most major thing that I've made since I did my life size gremlin. The only reason that the gremlin ended up taking longer is because it has so many kind of scales and things. This one was much easier. If you're doing skin texture, it's much quicker to do than scaly texture. So I have ended up using a lot of Milliput on this. I used 4 boxes of standard Milliput and 1 box of black Milliput. So if you think about, each box contains 10 individual packs. So I used 40 packs of standard and 10 packs of black. So it's a lot. And when I stand on the scales and I hold ET just to figure out what he weighs, he's, I think, about 2.5 stone. So it's quite a heavy figure for me to carry around, and I'm going to be taking it in to show my students at some point at my work. So I'll have to take him in the car and then carry him to my various centres. So I'm not really looking forward to that. I might actually wheel him in a trolley. If I still had a BMX, I could just get a basket to go on the front and use that to take him in instead. I think it's really difficult because everybody has their own sort of image in their mind of what ET looks like for them. And for me, this is my sort of typical ET, what I've made here. What I find quite difficult is, when you watch the movie, obviously you see him in lots of different poses. There's one where he's got his mouth open and he's kind of screaming a little bit, or there's one where his neck is really high up. There's another one where his neck is really low down and closer to the ground, and it makes him look a lot shorter. So I wanted to kind of get him with his neck sort of kind of half up, and I wanted his head to be facing forward. I think I've managed to get the exact face, like exactly how I wanted it to be. That's how I always kind of picture ET in my mind. I used lots of different reference material when I made this, lots of stills from the movie. And also I wanted to get that pose with his finger pointing out a little bit as well, and that was important to me. But I also wanted that, that sense that he could just kind of waddle off at any point. And hopefully I've caught that. Let me know in the comments what you think of him at this stage anyway, and then I'll post the video of the painting stages separately so you can see that, and you can let me know in the comments what you think of that one as well. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and hope it's inspired some of you to have a go at making an ET of your own. Thanks for watching, and hit subscribe if you want to see anything that I post up in the future. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next video.